could be a huge shakeup for the 2020 race. Beto O'Rourke has made his move. The former Texas congressman who nearly took down Senator Ted Cruz in Texas has now joined the Democratic fight to take down, in fact, President Trump. O'Rourke ended months of speculation earlier today, officially launching his presidential bid in a campaign video.
Amy and I are happy to share with you that I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. This is a defining moment of truth for this country and for every single one of us. This moment of peril produces perhaps the greatest moment of promise for this country and for everyone inside of it.
O'Rourke's entry jolts an already crowded field of over a dozen Democrats vying for the party's nomination for president. He spent his first day on the campaign trail in Iowa, starting a three-day swing through the early caucus state. Here goes.
The very first event of our campaign for president is an example not only of the way that I wish to campaign across this country for every single American. We are all Americans and we are all human beings, and we do everything within our power for one another, for this great country, and for every generation that follows. This is democracy. Any single Democrat running today, and I may not be able to enumerate every single one of them right now, would be far better than the current occupants of the White House. Ultimately, we all have to get on board the same person, because it is fundamental to our chances of success that we defeat Donald Trump in 2020.
Well, O'Rourke has a big campaign kickoff event scheduled for later this month in his hometown of El Paso, Texas. For his part, President Trump waited on his latest potential rival, mocking Beto in an Oval Office photo op with the Irish Prime Minister.
What's your reaction to Beto O'Rourke's announcement today, Mr.
Well, I think he's got a lot of hand movement. I've never seen so much hand movement. I said, is he crazy or is that just the way he acts? So I've never seen hand movement. I watched him a little while this morning doing, I assume it was some kind of a news conference, and I've actually never seen anything quite like it. Study it. I'm sure you'll agree.
Who's the bigger threat, Beto O'Rourke or Joe Biden?
I just say whoever it is, I'll take him on, okay? Him or her. Whoever it is, I'll take him or her on.
For more, I'm joined by U.S. Congressman Salud Garibal of California, who was O'Rourke's housemate in Washington for 2 years. We got some intimate information here. Heidi Presley, NBC News national political correspondent. Jamal Simmons, Democratic strategist and host of The Hill TV. And Sam Stein, of course, politics editor for The Daily Beast. Thank you all. Look, I'm a little lighthearted today because I like this field. It's got a new levity to it. But let's talk about this hand thing, because Trump has got the weirdest gestures I've ever seen. He's got everything. He does Jesus, and he does everything. He's got the hand up like this, he's got this like this, and here he is making fun. What do you make of these gestures, Congressman? You're his roommate. Did he do that at night when he rehearsed?
You know, what you see with Beto is what you get in person. He's that lively, extremely authentic. He's just an extraordinary guy.
But being kinetic like that was I watched him on the campaign show. I think it's part of his appeal. I think that liveliness, that physicality, that outdoorsiness seems to work with people.
Absolutely. I think so, too.
I think it's not just that, it's his words. Because I didn't see it, Chris. I was listening to it on the radio, and it was
today in the video.
Yes, it was the words that he used as well. He had a way of speaking inspirationally, but also really seriously laying out the stakes of inaction and what could happen if the current administration goes in the current trajectory, for example, with global warming. He was very serious and spoke, in a way that I think connected with people. And he had a lot of human stories, too. Like when he was talking about everything from medicinal marijuana to global warming, he brought it back to individual people. But at the same time, I saw already people are starting to question, his experience in Congress and whether a similar candidate who may be a minority candidate or a woman candidate could really propel this way.
What would you rather be? Would you rather be a guy without a lot of tin cans riding from the back of his car, like Joe Biden has 40 or some years to defend Anita Hill? He's got to defend his opposition, busing, the crime bill, incarceration, or a guy that's fresh off the bench?
Yeah, he's fresh off the bench. Listen, I think here's where Trump is masterful, though, because Trump is like that person that says, yeah, that guy's nice, but he's got that mole on his chin. Now, the only thing you can ever see is the mole on the guy's chin when you look at him, right? So he's pointed
So the
out,
gyrations are now going to be the issue?
He has pointed it out, and we just spent 3-4 minutes here at the conversation to have a conversation about it.
Because I want to see, Trump is noted for being Mr. Nickname, as you just said. And let's see what his best punch is. Is this his best punch?
Well, this is his opening bid, and he's trying to figure out how to size the guy up. Here's what the difference is, though. Donald Trump has never had to fight somebody who was a digital and social media native the way Beto O'Rourke is. Everybody else has been trying to figure out how to learn how to operate in this space. Right. Trump lives there, and Beto lives there. Now we're going to see two people who both know how to fight in that ring and see whether or not they can take each other on.
Sam,
now, Beto's got to get to the general election.
What is your wizened thought about this? I mean, really, I think it's here's my, let me try, you first, because you're as smart as I am at this. What do you think the guy's got? What does he lack? Beto.
Well, he has a vibrancy, a youthfulness to him. He has a message which is largely cheerful. And what he lacks is fairly evident, which is a record, which is substantial political wins. He did beat an incumbent in his own party to get into Congress, but he obviously lost his Senate race. And I think Heidi articulates something which I picked up among other Democrats I've talked to, which is sort of general sense of frustration that he is being given a pass that wouldn't be afforded to female candidates or minority candidates because he has this generational appeal. Now, you know, there's two things that voters take into account when they try to pick a nominee for a presidency. One is, can they win, which is paramount, obviously. And two is, can they be a good president? And it's increasingly clear over the past couple elections that voters value the first one much more than the second one. And I think for Beto, that's actually a benefit. People look at him and they think, oh, I would like to see the contrast that he makes with Donald Trump. And they don't look at him and say, well, can he handle the job of president?
It's a great question.
And so, you know, the question becomes, can his primary rivals reverse that dynamic? Can they make it more about the second question versus the first?
In fact, I have three questions. I would agree completely. How will he do against, if he gets to do it against Trump, and how's he served for 4 or 8 years as president, which is a much more important question maybe. But the first question before those two is, who's going to turn on the people in those early tests in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and California, because that may decide everything there. Anyway, the enthusiasm O'Rourke created during his Senate campaign in Texas propelled him to the national stage, of course. And a new Vanity Fair profile out last night, we saw it, I got a peek at it. O'Rourke tried to make sense of his rise. He told the magazine, quote, this is what Congressman, I want you to answer this. This is about O'Rourke talking to Joe Hagan. I honestly don't know how much of it, he's talking about the enthusiasm, was me. But there is something abnormal, supernormal, or I don't know what the hell to call it, that we both experienced, he and his wife Amy, when we were out in the campaign trail. That magical, the thing that maybe you're right, Sam, is unfair, but it's not like we in the press created it. There's something out there that is magical.
Well, I think one is his charisma, no doubt. But two, he has a unifying, positive message that I think is a clear alternative to what we've seen for the past 2.5 years. And I think the country is tired of this division, tired of the demagoguing that this president has been doing. And they want somebody who's going to focus on what we can do together and bring us together and unify us as a nation, take us into the future to solve the issues that every American wants us to solve.
You can teach message, you can teach policy. You can't teach charisma. And I think that's the thing that Democrats are reacting to. He's got a long road ahead of him. He's got to build an organization. We've got to see what his policies are. But what he has to start with is a charisma that you just can't manufacture.
What does he deal with the resentment thing that Sam just talked about? Hey, this guy's getting a lot of attention. Front page of Vanity Fair, all the talk we're giving him. But I want to start with something. It seems to me we could have a lot of brackets, like in, March Madness. We can say the older liberals or older left would be Bernie versus Elizabeth. We could say the new left, which would be Kamala versus Corey. And we could say the older white guys, if we were just the older traditional candidates, which would be, well, there's nobody really in the game except Biden.
Left now.
He's there because he lost Michael Bloomberg and he lost Sherrod Brown. But there's another bracket, the fighters, who came off with a little bit, they come off with a little anger. They start off against Kavanaugh, I said the other day, Kamala and Corey went off a little angry at the guy. Then there's people who said, let's get together and be friends and let's work this stuff out. Those are the two totally different brackets. And it seems like Beto is competing. He's bad news for Biden. Because in that bracket, let's try to work together. He's the new kid, Biden's the old kid.
He's the next gen electable.
Yeah.
Biden is the graybeard electable. And so I don't think that we'll know the answer to that question until we see them both on the stage together, and they will be on the stage together. They will both meet that threshold. And the difference with Beto, though, is I think he still can claim some level of progressive credentials while
he says the right
still
stuff.
talking
Yeah.
to independent voters and not alienating independent voters. Whereas, like you mentioned with Biden, he's got to reconcile, 20, 30 years of history where social change has really come to the progressive base of the Democratic Party. There's some things that he's going to have to reconcile. But, Beto he could flame. He could flame out.
By the way, everybody's learning how to pronounce
If
it
he doesn't-
because Heidi just pronounced it better than me. You bite it off. Beto. Anyway,
I think Democrats are in a good place. This is a good problem to have. We have so many talented individuals vying for the nomination, and certainly Beto is the latest one and one that I think would make not only a great candidate,
You vote
but
for him?
will likely
Well, you're a
be a
California
great president.
You voted in the
I
California
have a good
primaries.
relationship as well with Kamala Harris, and I will be making a decision in the future.
Okay,
but
I
will
got
tell
to ask you a question. It's not on
I
the
like them
prompter
both.
yet. You have an unusual experience. I really do think I was roommates with my brother for years growing up. We all had brothers, I think, growing up, or I did. And you're growing up and you get to know somebody. And what did you get to know about it that doesn't show up on television that we should know about? Beto.
He's just down to earth.
Same guy?
You sit down with him, the same person you see on TV, the same person you might see at a dinner event. You'll see when you just sit down
Who
with
cooked and who cleaned up?
him. We all cooked. We all cooked, we all cleaned. But he was the best cook. He did
But
a
you
mean
know-
flank steak.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.